Welcome to resilient.com. Today in our studio we have a good friend of mine, Mr. George Morris. And for those of you that have watched some of our videos, you'll know resilience, all about resilience. Imagine that. But a lot of the subjects or folks we've talked to on this channel are usually, skydivers and stunt drivers and Formula One guys and soldiers. But today I have a different kind of warrior in here. And in a way, I kind of feel like this type of warrior is an incredible example, almost more of an example to me than any of the sports studs out there. And George is one of those guys. The first time I met him, I think I actually hired you, George, to do a website for the company I was working for at the time.
Many moons ago.
PCS, and your company was called Emulus, if I'm not mistaken. And George was this wizard. He was different to anybody else, a super go-getter, young entrepreneur who was all about perfection, and he threw out things like SEO optimization back in the day, and we're like, what is this stuff? But he had it going on. And to me, George has always been this vicarious, outgoing guy who's super bright and a great entrepreneur. And over the years we stayed friends, and we used to do some Wednesday morning bike rides with a bunch of guys. So Georgie would be out there, we'd all be out suffering up Old Stage Road in Boulder and having fun. And over the years, just always been a great example of a young entrepreneur. And then I found out through George's social media in December that he had stage 4 cancer. I believe it was prostate and renal.
Yeah, I got the gift of 2 cancers.
You got the gift of 2 cancers.
Yep.
And you're thinking to yourself, holy shit, like my whole life I've been blessed with health and being an athletic guy, and George was too. And for me personally, I was like, wow, how's George doing? And so here we are today to talk a bit about where you're at today and the incredible example. And I think for me, George, one of the things that first comes to mind is like, how did it feel, being this, go-getter entrepreneur, doing scaling up and all sorts of cool things in the business world, and then one day you get this news. I mean, how does it feel?
Well, I think for me, the thing is it's surreal. A lot of this feels surreal. And I remember the night of Christmas when I got my stage 4 diagnosis. I remember the doctor just walked in and he said to me, he's an older guy, and he just looked at me and he's like, I take it you're a straight shooter. I'm like, I totally am. He's like, come here. And he asked me to go over to the x-rays and look at the x-rays, and he points out these masses in my chest and he goes, you see this, this, and this? You know what that means, don't you? And I'm like, yeah, I know what that means. He's like, I'm sorry, brother. And he gives me a hug. And I'm like, okay, I guess I got cancer, right? It was just like the weirdest way to say it, but I actually appreciated it. It wasn't drawn out. He just kind of told me this is the facts.
How did you know what it was?
I mean, I've seen it on TV before, or I've seen it in movies. Like it stood out. I mean, you could see my lungs and you could see my ribs and you could see these just masses all over the place. I'm like, I don't know what those are, but they're not organs, right? Like they stood out as clusters. And it just kind of hit me surreal. Like, am I dreaming? Is this a dream? Because I really want to wake up from this dream right now if I'm dreaming. And, it slowly settled into me in the next 48 hours. The 48 hours after my diagnosis was really a matter of like, accept this. This is real. This is not going away. And I've always been someone who has looked to the Stoics. I love Stoicism. Even before I knew it was Stoicism. As a kid, my father died when I was 14 of a heart attack. His father died at age 60 when I was born. And I've always believed since I was a kid that I wasn't going to make it past 55. I just always believed that because my father didn't make it past 55. He died the day before his 56th birthday, and he promised my cousins that he wasn't going to make it past 55. He knew somehow he died before his 56th birthday. So he knew somehow he died before his 56th birthday. So he died the day before, and it really struck me. And so for a long time, I believed I was going to die of a heart attack. And I remember at the time as a kid, this was 1990 when he passed away. And when it happened, we didn't have therapists, we didn't have child psychologists. I had a mother that was floored. I had 2 brothers and a sister that didn't live with us. And I had to cope on this myself. So I had to figure this all out myself. There was no one there to comfort me. And this is going to sound really strange, but we latch on to whatever we can latch on to at the time. And for me, I was getting into bodybuilding. I was a big fan of Arnold Schwarzenegger. And I watched all the Arnold movies.
Okay.
One of his movies was Conan the Barbarian.
Oh, yeah.
And in the beginning of it, there's a quote from a guy named Friedrich Nietzsche.
Okay.
And it says, "That which does not kill us makes us stronger." I latched onto that as my guiding light, so that I knew that going forward, no matter how hard this was going to get with me, growing up without a father, I always told myself, that which does not kill you makes you stronger. And so that was my hook into Stoicism at an early age, because Nietzsche was a Stoic. He studied the Stoics.
Right. And that was when you were like 14.
14 years old.
Wow.
And so I just always latched on to that which does not kill us makes us stronger. And I always say that to myself. I mean, I have the tattoos on my arm, Unt actio amor fati. Take action, love your fate. I had that tattooed on my arm probably it'd be about 14 months before I got cancer. Because the amor fati, that means to love your fate. So whatever situation you are in, fully love it, fully embrace it, and find meaning in it, even though you shouldn't love it, right? And the term came to me from a story I heard about a father whose son was driving his car, normally no problem, a drunk driver hit him, put his son into a coma, and his son was into a coma for years, and the father was angry and outraged for a while, but then became best friends with the driver who put his son in that situation. And he found love in that awful situation. Right. And I'm like, that's amor fati. Fati.
So in life, I mean, you dealt this hand of cards. Prior to this, were you as much of a Stoic? Were you, you said in 14 you started adopting that approach, but as you matured into your, past your teens and into your, 30s,
40s,
whatever it is. I'm not going to give you an age away.
48, I'm old.
Were you constantly reminded of that, Nietzsche thing?
Always.
You always.
Everything that I faced, everything I faced throughout my life, anytime something would get hard, I would say to myself, I'm not dead. I'm not dead. And like, how bad is it? And realizing it's usually in a tough situation, it's always temporary. Even though it sucks when you're in the suck and you really don't know how long the suck is going to be there, just anchoring back to the fact of, I'm still alive. I'm still alive. It has not killed me. And when I come out of this, which I know I will, I just don't know how long, or this is going to end me, regardless, I'm still alive. I'm still here. I still have an opportunity. And to me, that quote always stuck with me. And then as I got older, I learned its origins. I learned the Stoics. I understood the Stoics more. And I feel like that's really helped me more than anything. And everybody has their own thing. I mean, some people turn to God. Some people turn to religion and spirituality. And there's an element of that for me, but I really feel like for me, it's Stoics. And that belief that, you can get through. You can get through a lot of things, and so much requires mindset and having the right mindset.
So you weren't a guy you didn't turn to faith or anything else, or spirituality, you just focused on those things that you learned at a young age?
Yeah, I mean, so 2 things there. I would say, because of the belief that I had, and I really dropped the belief that I was going to die at age 55, several years ago when I had a journey with psychedelics, that I came to peace with the death of my father, and kind of grieved in a way that I didn't grieve when I was 14. And I feel like I kept that grief with me for many decades and didn't realize it. I thought I had moved past it, and I never really moved past it. So I moved past it in my 40s. And then, the lessons and the thinking all stood with me. So when I got cancer, I feel like I just applied the things that I was already kind of preparing myself for. I just pulled them, kind of dusted them off and said, okay, now you're going to apply it in a way that you did not think was going to happen, because my entire family, there's no example of renal cancer. There's prostate cancer. There's 3 family members have prostate cancer. My dad, in the autopsy, they found traces of it.
Okay.
So I was prepared that I was going to get prostate cancer and I would deal with that. And I got that news 2 weeks before I got the news of the renal cancer.
Okay.
But the renal cancer has no genetic trait. The renal cancer I acquired, and I believe I acquired that from my mismanagement of the energy of my divorce.
Okay.
And possibly from some other things, you know, in terms of environmental or whatever. But I don't spend a lot of time asking why I got this. It is, I got it.
So when you got the news, you weren't thinking back and checking the list or boxes of eat healthy or never drink or never smoke. You just sort of...
I didn't spend too much time with it. I gave it some thought. I mean, I can look through things like, you know, I was exposed to asbestos a couple times, and I did harsh chemicals a couple times, but nothing in my path would give me renal cancer. Renal cancer is usually from really a bad diet, not a healthy lifestyle, excessive weight. I didn't really have that, so it didn't make sense. And I truly feel like the lion's share of my cancer is from a mismanagement of how I handled the end of my marriage and my divorce. And I lost my gallbladder after my divorce. So in Chinese medicine, the gallbladder is tied to courage.
Okay.
And so I felt like I needed the courage to leave earlier, and I stayed in it too long. And I feel like your body is a management of energy, and the energy just kind of collected and stagnated there, which has led to cancer. In my own experience, that's how I look at it. And to answer the question about the spiritual side, there's an element of it that is spiritual, in the sense of, I believe, I don't really, I believe in the fact that we're all energy, and I believe that I don't have a consciousness of what was before this. I just at some point came online as a human being. I don't really remember the exact day or point, right? At some point I became conscious of my life, and at some point that consciousness is going to end. I don't know what's after this. I believe there is something that I'm not conscious of, and I don't have the ability to access. But I also believe I came from nothing. I'm going to go back to nothing, and there's a chance that maybe I am recreated in some other way that I'm not conscious of. Whichever happens, it's all going to be okay. And that's the other piece. That's the spiritual side for me. It's a belief that it's all going to be okay.
So you're a loving father, have kids, have a partner with kid or kids?
Kid.
With a kid.
Yep.
So how did the whole support structure for you work when you got the diagnosis? How did that all unravel?
Yeah, that was Stephanie. So Stephanie, my partner, she came in and she swooped out of nowhere to basically move out of her place that she just moved into, came down, support the kids, move into the house, do everything, like just rally so much around me, because my family's all back in Philadelphia. I'm out here in Colorado. But really just rallied around me to kind of talk to all of my friends and families and like shelter me from that communication and shelter me from all the questions and help coordinate the doctors, the medication, the drives. And like, I'm only really starting to appreciate that now as I'm coming out of the shit fog of opioids, right? Like I was dosed on some heavy morphine and oxycodone and a lot of other stuff. And now that that stuff's pretty much out of my system, I'm building an awareness of just how sheltered and how cared for I was. And now that I'm getting stronger, I'm able to see it and appreciate it a lot more.
And how do you handle the kid side of this? I mean, that's going to be a little scary to navigate, right? Giving them the news.
That was one of the hardest days. Yeah, I'm going to get emotional on this one, and I'm okay with that. But I remember the day after Christmas. So, context. Yeah. 2 weeks prior to my diagnosis, I'm diagnosed with early stage prostate cancer.
Got it.
we strategized, Stephanie and my ex-wife Shannon. We talked about it, we strategized, we're like, we're not going to tell the kids this until after Christmas. We don't want it to affect their Christmas. And I'm like, okay, so we'll tell them the day after Christmas. And I'm like, okay, and it's prostate cancer, so I'm like, this is manageable.
Yeah.
You can just cut the thing out, and that's the end of it. But it would freak kids out. And then on Christmas, and the months prior to this, I developed a really bad cough. And we didn't know what it was. The doctors thought it was acid reflux, which didn't make sense because I never had it. And I always thought that I could shake off the cough, that I could get out of the cough. But this cough persisted, and I kept getting this pain in my side that I thought was like a muscle spasm. And the doctors looked at it, they're like, we don't think it's a muscle spasm. And on the night of Christmas, the pain was so bad that Steph dropped me off at the hospital. And I said to the doctors, I think from my coughing, I cracked a rib because it hurt so bad. And that's why they did the x-rays.
Wow.
And they came back and said, no, you've got cancer. So I had to tell the kids. I couldn't move around my house without telling my kids that I had cancer. So the day after Christmas, I sat them in a room. We brought in Steph's son as well. We sat on the couch, and the kids can sense it. You could see it. They're like, what's wrong? What's wrong? Something's not right. Like, you don't bring us together for like this the day after Christmas. And I had to tell them, like, Dad's got stage 4 cancer. And everyone just started crying. And I just remember that being really hard. And the hardest thing was, look, all of us are crying, but the hardest thing was Kyle, my 14-year-old. He said to me, he's like, Dad, I just turned 14 and your dad died when you were 14. And I'm like, just like, that hit me because it brought me back to that age. And I said to him, I go, that's not going to happen. And he's like, you promise? I'm like, that's not going to happen. I'm not going to die when you're 14. And he's like, okay. And that was hard, really hard. And then we sat there for a couple hours. My ex-wife came over to kind of show support and be there with the kids. And we all just kind of talked through it for several hours and went about our day. And then the weeks that followed, there was a lot of questions and fluctuation of emotion. We all got through it, and we're still getting through it. You know, there's still things that pop up. I would say largely life has returned to normal, but there is no normal. Like, the day that I didn't have cancer, those days are gone.
Yeah.
And today is now, and today is a very different day than what things looked like pre-cancer.
So, and what about the entrepreneur side of you? There's George Morris, the entrepreneurs doing startups and internet businesses and scaling up, coaching and all sorts of cool stuff. What happens, you know, when all this drops? Like, what do you do in your business?
I also look at the universe, and I think the universe, I don't know that it has a plan, but I think things kind of flow and connect in interesting ways. You know, my conversion from running a business to coaching businesses came at the perfect time. I was hitting my stride as a coach basically the same month that I got diagnosed with cancer. And I'm like, I love my coaching. I love what I'm doing with my clients. I have momentum like none other. I love all of it. And then I get the cancer diagnosis, and there's a part of me that's like, really? Like, this is the time? Yeah, and it's almost humorous, right? Like,
Bad time,
yeah, I look at it and I'm like, okay, but what's the lesson here, right? Like, in my eyes, I was given the opportunity to change everything about what I was doing as my career, my profession, get it to a point where I felt solid and stable, and then I was put into this situation. And I'm like, okay.
Like WTF.
Yeah, I did, but I'll tell you, this is where I applied the amor fati. Is this Christmas, I did not get a single gift. It was the only Christmas that I received no gifts whatsoever. And as a father, as you get older, you just don't get gifts. But this is the first Christmas I had 0 gifts.
By request or just
by chance?
No,
just by chance.
Huh.
But I got cancer on Christmas. And there's a part of me that looks at that and says, that was my gift. And that's the amor fati. Can I accept that cancer was given to me at this point, at this time, as a gift? And I'm working my way there. I can't say that I have fully accepted that, but I'm trying to look at it and say, there are lessons here to be learned. And in the process of going through and having the cancer, I've been able to still work with my clients. They've held space for me. You know, they have said, you'll get through this, you'll work through it. And I had one client specifically tell me, don't worry about any of the work you do for us. We're going to continue to pay you.
Wow.
And we're going to stick with you through all of this, even if you don't show
Incredible.
up. Wow. And I'm like, thank you so much. I'm like, you will forever have me in your gratitude of that. And the clients have all stuck with me, and I've actually gained clients. And I tell them what's going on, and they're like, okay, whatever, you can still work with us, right? I'm like, yeah, sure. And so it hasn't destroyed my career. It has disabled my ability to work, you know, continuous hours for several days a week. I don't have the energy for that anymore. So I've had to learn how to be okay with not hustling. And in that being okay with not hustling, I've also realized that I haven't lost anything in my output, in my effectiveness. And that's allowed me to coach my clients better, to say, I get it. You're hustling. You're working 60 hours a week. But I know you can do all the same output with 20 hours a week.
That's amazing.
And so it's given me some insights.
So a gift in a strange way. I remember, you know, getting a notification from you or whatever around Christmas and saying to my wife, wow, this is not a Christmas gift anybody wants to ever get.
No.
You know what I mean? And yet in a fascinating way, for you, I understand where you're coming from. It maybe was a gift of sorts. And you've done an incredible job to, you know, take that gift, so to speak, and whether it's turn your life around or enhance in a strange way, right? I mean, wow, it's like, and that to me is what struck me about your story more than probably I've had a family member with cancer that survived cancer, and it was a lot more doom and gloom. But you seem to have approached it from this different angle, which is so refreshing. And I mean, I get there's different cancers and different degrees of cancer and types of cancer and outcomes, but just, you know, the way you've dealt with this has been, you know, inspirational to me personally, and I'm sure many other people.
Yeah, and I think for those that are listening, and for those that are in a similar spot, or if they find themselves in this spot, I mean, you just don't know what you're going to get along the way. I don't want to have people believe that somehow throughout this process it's always been that way. It hasn't been that way. It's been a cycle of ups and downs, largely going in the right direction, but there have been times, you know, like especially right after my diagnosis, I felt really good, really good in the sense of I got this, I don't feel like I have cancer, and they gave me steroids for the first week, and I actually felt like Superman. I'm like, actually, I feel better than I did. And the doctors are like, yeah, that's because you're on steroids. You can't keep this up. And I'm like, okay, I kind of like steroids. And then as they started giving me the immunotherapy drugs and the opioids, at first they put me on fentanyl. And I don't know the appeal of fentanyl, so there's no appeal to me. I felt so dark and gloomy on fentanyl. And I just remember, there was a couple days where I couldn't function. I got up, sat in my reclining chair, watched TV, and kept falling asleep. I was in and out of consciousness. And I'm like, this is not living. And I remember saying to Steph, what's the point? What's the point? If this thing is going to kill me now. Why do I have to be a lab rat and have the doctors experiment on me and put chemicals into me and slowly wither me away to the point that I die anyway? I'm like, why continue my suffering? Why not just end it right now?
So in other words, if the treatment's killing you, what's the point?
Exactly. And that's the way that I felt, because I went from a place of being about 185 pounds, and then when the treatment started, a combination of mostly the cancer and the drugs, my weight just dropped. I mean, literally every day I look in the mirror when I get a shower and I'm like, oh my God, I'm getting thinner and thinner and thinner. So I went from 185 pounds all the way down to my lowest weight, which was 147.
Wow.
And just to put that into perspective, when I was in 6th grade, I was 160.
Jeez.
So for me at 147, I'm like a skeleton.
How tall are you?
Just about 6 foot.
6, okay.
It's just under 6 foot.
Wow.
So I'm like, I could actually see the ribs in my chest. And I'm like, and that was freaking me out because I'm like, I've seen this in movies about AIDS, in movies about cancer, of these people that look like they came out of a concentration camp.
Yeah, like Auschwitz.
Auschwitz, yeah. And I could see my sunken cheeks and I'm like, this can't keep up. This won't keep up. And so my sadness of feeling like these drugs are dragging me down, this cancer is winning, I got to a place probably in mid-March.
So
where
it was like 3-4 months after your diagnosis?
It's about 2 months.
2 months.
Because after my diagnosis, there was a 2 or 3 week period before they started treatment. Because they had to run all the tests, do the lung biopsy and all of that. And so there's a 2-month period from January to the middle of March where I was losing weight. I dropped almost 40 pounds almost in 2 months. And in middle of March, I remember it very clearly. I was still struggling with the ups and downs, and I had a very low point. And I'm like, I don't know if I want to continue doing this. And then the same.
Meaning you're ready to go.
I'm ready to go.
You're done with
And
it.
I'm done with it. And I'm like, and so.
So what did they say to you?
I didn't talk to anybody about it.
That's how you felt.
That's how I felt. I talked to Stephanie about it. At night before bed, I would say to Stephanie, there was at least 3 nights in that course where at different times I said to Steph, I'm like, I don't know if I want to continue. And she's like, just push through. If you don't want to continue 6 months from now, I get it. I understand. But right now, push through. And I'm like, okay. And I'm like, I need my friends to help me with mindset. I need to get my mindset right. And so I relied on some of my friends from the entrepreneur organization, EO.
Oh, yeah.
And I called my friend Andy up, who's really a positive mindset guy. And I'm like, Andy, I need you in my pocket here. I need you to give me a pep talk. And then my friend Jeff, he made me a poster around mindset. He kept telling me, you got to beat this. He would give me lots of Rocky analogies from Philly. So they kept me in mostly the positive, but it only takes a few dark days. And I remember in my divorce, I had a few dark days. And so when I was in those dark days, the one thing I would always tell myself, if you're prepared to die and you're okay with dying, then what is the riskiest thing that you can do to get out of it? And I'm like, and that's always what got me out of that area.
Wow.
Because I'm like, if you're gonna die, you can take any risk you're wanting to take.
Right.
And so in mid-March, without talking to anybody, I stopped my medication, all of my medication. And it was a Thursday that I stopped. And Steph went to work on a Friday. And I remember that Friday feeling so much pain because I went off the opioids. And I felt so much pain. I had these bouts of hot, cold, where my upper body would feel like it's burning.
Wow.
My legs were freezing, and then they would flip. And I couldn't sleep, I couldn't stay awake, state. And then I didn't say anything, and then Saturday came around, and Steph's like, why are you feeling this way? And I'm like, well, I discontinued most of my medication. And she's like, you what? And I'm like, I stopped taking my morphine, mostly. All the opioids that were making me sleepy and not feeling the pain. And she's like, you're going through withdrawal. And I'm like, yeah, maybe I am. Wow. And the doctors jumped on the phone with me. They're like, George, you cannot do this. You got to go back on the drugs. And so...
Why did they say that?
Because I was going through withdrawal. And I would continue to have withdrawal alone can kill you if you're not...
So it's dangerous.
Dangerous. And I didn't know that. It could kill you. And so I'm like, okay. And I just got to this point where I was just angry. And I was on 17 different pills.
Wow.
And I said to the doctors at the time, okay, then if I'm going to take these pills again, I want you to go through each one of them and you tell me what exactly these things are doing to my body. And we went through line by line by line what each drug was doing, and I made the mental note to accept each drug and said, I know what this drug's doing, I know its side effects, I know what it's supposed to be doing for my body. And went through each drug, and I said, okay, I will take these, and I commit to them, and then I started getting better.
Wow.
But I had to get to a point where I had to like accept the drugs and the side effects of the drugs.
Wow. So Steph, and Steph wasn't too happy when she heard
She
you.
was not happy about me
Imagine.
doing that. And
Oh,
I wasn't happy with her response because I was just kind of like, well, nothing's working and I keep losing weight. And the other thing I did with it was when pre-cancer and even when I got cancer, I've been very cognizant of the foods I eat. I don't really eat fatty foods, sugary foods. I do have a sweet tooth here and there, but when I made that shift to take the medication, I said, you know what? I love peanut butter cups. I'm going to eat the shit out of peanut butter cups. I'm going to eat as many hoagies as I can eat. I'm going to eat ice cream like it's going out of style. Because I wasn't able to eat for those 3 months, every time I looked at food, I would be repulsed.
Wow.
And if I ingested it, I wanted to throw it up. Like salad would gag me. And so I'm like, just whatever my body will say yes to, I'll eat. And out of the blue, I'm like, I want an Arby's roast beef sandwich. And I haven't had one of those in like 30 years. And Steph's like, you really want an Arby's roast beef sandwich? I'm like, don't ask me why, but give me one right now. And I got it, and I keep eating, so yeah.
That's amazing. So when you talk to other people, or let's talk about the bigger picture, cancer, I mean, and I say to you, George, now that you're, on this road and you've been down this road of cancer, the dreaded F cancer, what advice would you give those people that are in that dark place? You've been through the dark place, and how you mentioned you had buddies that helped perk you up, but if you were giving advice to somebody who's going through the same thing, what would it be right now?
It's a great question. I think it would be, if you haven't reached the point of the suck, the really dark, heavy point of it, you're probably not there yet, but you will reach this point of suck, is to push through the suck. And I remember the doctors telling me that too. The doctors told me this is going to get a lot worse for you before it starts to get better. And they gave me a time frame of the end of March, beginning of April, and they're almost right. So my advice would be for anybody who's in it, that's in that dark place, it possibly will get darker. And accept the fact that it's going to get darker because it has to get darker before it's going to rebound and get better. But you'll adapt, we'll adapt, we all adapt to it. We just got to keep going and pushing through it and find something to push through. For me, the reason was my kids. I would have to say, and everybody has their own reason, whatever that reason is for them. But there was 2 things that really helped me get through the suck. Once I realized that I am going to go on, I am going to live through this, I needed to answer the question, but why? Why do you want to live? What's your reason for pushing through this? Because if you just want to live because you're afraid of dying, that's not a good enough reason. And I wasn't afraid of dying. I'm not afraid of dying.
I was going to ask you that. Did it change, when you get that dreaded diagnosis? Well, for some people, obviously, what about death? What does it make you feel about death? Do you feel closer to death in any way?
Yeah.
Do you feel more? Does it,
I feel real close to death. I feel like death is with me 24/7. And I said that's one of the things that I realized that I was taking for granted. We all walk around with death following us, and we don't see it because it's following us.
Right.
The difference is I'm staring death in the eyes every day. Death is not behind me, death is in front of me. And so it forces me on a continual basis to keep saying, I'm lucky I'm here today. I'm lucky I have the capabilities that I have. And I'm fortunate to have all those things. I could lose them at any moment. But right now I'm feeling a lot of gratitude for the fact that I'm capable of doing what I'm capable of doing. And in that time frame, there are people close to me, family, friends, strangers that have been killed, that have lost their lives in that time. And if you were a betting man in Christmas, you would put your poker chips on me and saying, this guy's going to kick the bucket before anybody else I know. And that's not true. Life can be taken from us at any moment. So cancer has given me the perspective of, right now it hasn't taken me, so enjoy it.
And how much of that do you think is due to your fight? I mean, you're a guy who's fighting. You're like fighting the fight. You have this, the Nietzsche stuff and the whole motivation. Since you're the Rocky Balboa, you're like Rocky Balboa coming back. I mean, if you didn't have that, if you were not instilled with that from an early age when your dad passed, do you think you'd be as resilient or as able to combat this dreadful disease as you've been, or successful?
I don't know. It's hard to answer questions like that. I don't know because, the experience with my father and then growing up with the perspective I had, it just introduced me to that world a lot earlier. And the thing is with this perspective of life and fight, I had a shift the first few weeks of my diagnosis. I hear everybody say, F cancer.
F cancer.
Okay, you can edit that out.
I don't blame you for saying that. I go with that.
Yeah. So F cancer, you got to fight it. And what I realized, and I adopted that fighting mindset, like I'm going to win and I'm going to beat cancer. In fact, if you remember my stuff, I gave my cancers names of opponents like Mike Tyson and Muhammad Ali, because I'm going to take them down. This is like a fight, and I'm going to beat each one of these metastases. And what I realized, and one of the times I was laying down and sleeping, I realized that what am I fighting? I'm fighting myself. Cancer is not some invader from outside. It's my body's own cells that have chosen not to listen to the programming of my body. And so, to me, cancer, and this is probably not going to be accepted by a lot of people, but cancer to me is a disease of not listening. It's a disease of not listening to your body and what your body is telling you. It's a disease of not listening to the knowledge that you inherently have in your body, that your mind resists and fights. It's a stagnation of energy. And I started to ask myself, what am I not hearing that needs to be heard? What is my body trying to tell me that I am not listening to? And I need to, from this point forward, with my treatment, let my body drive the decisions I'm making and not my mind. Because my mind got me into this mess, my body will get me out of this mess. And on a car ride down to the hospital for treatment, I was talking to my friend Jeff, and I ran through all these statistics and stuff, and I said, well, people only live 2 to 5 years, and blah, 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 blah. And he stopped me, and he's like, where's that all coming from? And I'm like, my head. And he's like, and how are you doing right now? I'm like, otherwise I feel fine. He's like, that's where you're at right now. You feel fine. You're okay. You're not in that place 2 to 5 years from now. And I'm like, he's dead on. I was getting in my head, I needed to get back into my body. And since I've been back in my body and listening to my body and not ignoring it, that's how I've been healing. So I gotta believe there's something to that.
That's awesome, George. Well, that's inspirational stuff, certainly for me to hear, and I'm sure some of the people watching this. I mean, you're a warrior of sorts, and the perspective is fascinating. And for those of us that are, aspire to be resilient in so many different ways, it's very inspiring. And I just, we'll stay close to your story, and I know you're going to do it because you're a guy who can do it. And thanks for sharing.
Yeah, appreciate it.
It's really inspirational. So we'll stay in touch and keep updating us.
Well, hopefully that's useful for some people that are out there.
Thanks, George.
Thank you.